to the Infinity Bros podcast, the only podcast that is perfectly balanced, as all things should be. Yes, it is me, the man, the myth, the legend himself, back from the grave. I haven't spoken to any of you guys in probably a month now, which is wild for me. But yeah, it is Jarret, the elusive Infinity Bear, hosting an episode. I don't think I've hosted an episode in like 6 months. So this is going to be pretty wild. Joining me today, we have none other than probably one of my top 5 Infinity Bros. Don't tell the other guys, though.
Oh, okay.
Isaac, how you doing, buddy?
I'll try to keep it under wraps, but, you know,
yeah,
those things
know.
Those things just get out, you know, eventually. So just try not to blame it on me when it does.
So I know, okay, I want to have a conversation about this just
Okay.
real quick. Because I don't want my secret getting out there that you are one of my top 5 Infinity Bros.
Okay.
You and I know for a fact, listen to almost every single episode, whether we're on it or not.
Yep.
Do you think any of the other guys do? I know obviously Max has to because
Right.
he edits, but
You know, that's actually a decent question. I don't think, because Max edits all of our episodes, most
Right.
of them actually. The last 2 I've edited, and it's not fun, so kudos to Max. He does a great job editing our podcast. I don't think he actually listens to them after he posts them.
no, actually, yeah, that's a good point. I don't think he does.
But
either.
he obviously has to listen to them to edit them, so you know he does his fair share. And I think Mark does, or Mark at least listens to the ones that he's not on, because he always comes
Sure.
back to the group chat with feedback about, you know, things we're talking
Spicy
about.
takes.
Stuff.
And, yeah.
But Zane and Robbie, I would not bet money that they listen to our podcast.
Let's do a test here. I have firmly grabbed the steering wheel away from Max and you, and this is my show right now.
This is
so
the Jarret Curtis
we're gonna play Calvin.
show.
Yeah, we're playing Calvin ball with the rules. This is the official Infinity Gauntlet for the 4 bros that are not here right now.
Ooh,
I want you
spicy.
to shoot me a message in the Infinity Bros chat telling me that I'm a Todd and you actually listen to this podcast. And if you don't, the next time I'm hosting, I'm roasting every single one of you. I'm airing your dirty laundry. Zane, I'm telling everybody about your brony addiction. It's going down.
Wow, it's gonna
Yeah.
get serious. Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Also, what time is it? It's officially 10:30 at night, and this is like my 5th cup of coffee. So we're getting spicy.
You're getting
after hours
caffeinated
shit.
Jarret. All right.
Yeah.
I love talking with caffeinated Jarret. That's one of my favorite versions.
It's
of
even
Jarret.
worse because it's not like it's not good coffee. It's not Mini World's Tavern. It is Folgers because I ran out.
It's a mistake.
So
Yeah, you gotta get yourself some Mini World's Tavern coffee.
and use code the Infinity Bros, all one word, all uppercase at checkout
For 10% off discount.
for 10% off. We do have a discount, which I know a lot of people are asking for.
Yeah, let's go.
You did not come here to listen to me berate my fellow Infinity Bros or to talk about my serious and concerning addiction to caffeine. No, you're probably here because somewhere along the line you saw the title Miss Marvel and you thought, surely these 2 idiots have something good or bad to say about Miss Marvel. So we'll go ahead and get into that now. I want to kind of soft play this at the beginning. We're not going to get into spoilers yet, but we are going to talk about a ranking system. So if you are not familiar with our ranking system, here we go.
Here on the Infinity Bros podcast, everything is ranked from a 0 to 6 point scale. 0 meaning horrible, and 6 meaning absolutely excellent. If all of the Infinity Bros rank something a 6, it gets an Infinity Step.
All right. Isaac, you have been sort of my lone soldier in the camp that we're in. And I won't spoil whether we love or hate Miss Marvel, but I am interested to see, coming into the finale, spoiler-free review, how has the series been treating you so far?
I think up to the finale, I've really enjoyed the show. You know, and obviously we will be spoiling that. We'll put the spoiler bumper in later. I up until the very final episode, I really enjoyed episodes 1 and 2 for sure. 3 and 4, they kind of started going away from what I enjoyed in 1 and 2. 5 was good for very different reasons than 1 and 2 were to me. So the tone shift just was kind of like jarring a little bit. And then 6 actually was a pretty decent, solid ending for the series. So coming into 6, I really didn't know what to expect. Like, these Marvel shows, honestly, are throwing me for a loop, because every single time we come to the finale, I'm like, how are they going to wrap this up? Like, I
Sure.
don't understand how they're going to cram everything into this final episode. But somehow, most of them have been able to be at least mostly satisfying
Sure.
in
Tie
what
up
they
loose ends,
deliver.
yeah.
So tie up loose ends and potentially open up to, a season 2, or like, going into another movie or a different show or something like that. So overall, I thought it was a great show. There were definitely some things that I wasn't crazy about. Like I said, that tonal shift was just a little jarring for me. So I give the show overall a 4 out of 6. Really enjoyed it. And we'll rank our Marvel Disney Plus shows later in the show. But definitely not a bad show by any means. And I'm really excited about Iman Vellani as Miss Marvel. I think they nailed that casting. She is incredible, and she's going to be awesome for the future of the MCU. So really enjoyed the show. What did you think of it, Jarret?
Yeah, for sure. So Miss Marvel is one that's always been like one of my top heroes. I'm a big Champions fan, and Miss Marvel was just an interesting character from the get-go. And I came into this more negatively than positive. Because of the early stuff that we saw with sort of the shifted power set and the way that played out. There were a lot of directions that this was heading early on, and I came to it a little hesitant. I didn't know if I was going to like it as much as I ended up. Spoiler alert, I did really enjoy this. I think the changes sort of make sense in the context of the show, and that first episode really set a tone. We've been talking about this. This is probably the thing we've said the most about the MCU in Phase 4 is like, they have to do things that are different. They have to do things that are interesting. And I think Miss Marvel is that. For better or for worse, some people love it, some people hate it. Miss Marvel is very different from the formula that we've gotten. And I loved it, man. I was here for the ride. I've been on vacation. I didn't talk about it much. That's part of the reason why I've been gone. But I actually didn't watch this series week by week as everybody else did. I watched, I believe, the first 2 or 3 episodes in one chunk. Then I went on vacation and did a million other things. And then I crammed the last 3 episodes yesterday, actually.
And we all tried to hold off so long for giving you spoilers to
You
let
guys,
you catch up on it.
I will say, as far as the actual spoilers for the series, nothing was spoiled to me. But your guys' opinions of the series, mainly the rest of the Infinity Bros, just spent 2 or 3 weeks just dunking on this series. And I was
we had a lot of discourse going on, and all relatively spoiler free. I mean, I know Mark and I mentioned last week in our episode that when a big show or a big movie comes out, it's almost kind of silent in the group chat because we're trying to avoid spoilers for everybody else who hasn't gotten around to see it. With so much content out there, we've had Umbrella Academy, The Boys, Miss Marvel, all going on. Yeah, Stranger Things, all going on at the same time. So it's kind of really hard to, determine who's watched these things, who hasn't, all that stuff. So that's been a little difficult. But I mean, I thought we were able to keep it relatively spoiler free, but there was a ton of discussion on what's going on with Miss Marvel. So I'm glad that we weren't able to bring you down. And what's interesting is that you mentioned that I know you at one point said, I am just not that interested in starting this series even. You hadn't even started watching it yet. And you were like, there's nothing drawing me to it right now based on what I've heard online, based on the trailers that we saw, all of that stuff. It just wasn't interesting enough for you to pick it up and start it right away and keep it up, every single week. And I came into this kind of from the opposite mindset. I was like, I think Iman Vellani looked like a stellar casting. I was pretty excited. I wasn't over the top hyped because there was a ton of conversation about how they were changing her power set. Right. I wasn't over the top hyped, but I was pretty optimistic coming into it. I was like, if they handle this power set change correctly, I think it's going to be fine, because the character of Miss Marvel, it's what's important. Like the traits that she, exhibits and how she portrayed her was perfect and just nailed her. So I came into it like pretty optimistic, and throughout the course of the series maybe came down a little bit from what my expectations were, but again, not to say that this show was a disappointment by any means. So
yeah, and you kind of nailed it too, is this cast that they put together across the board is just like an infectious group of people. You can't help but love them, and I think this is arguably one of the best, like, most well acted series out of this. And props to Feige for finding Iman Vellani. Like, she killed it, man.
Gosh, she's
and like
great.
the origin story of how she went from a fan of the MCU writing on these blog posts matches up one for one to the character of Miss Marvel, and so you literally cannot find a better casting than this. And she did phenomenal. Mm-hmm. But like you said, we had these discussions in chat, and a lot of it was before I had like finished the series. I'm not going to say who, because obviously I want them to be able to give their opinion and defend themselves a little bit. But some people in our group were kind of dunking on it, and so I was like, man, what am I getting in for these last 3 episodes?
Yeah.
And I freaking loved it, dude. It was so good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Let's before we shift to actually talking about the finale itself, I want to know, just from a standpoint, where are you sitting at with Phase 4 as a whole? Obviously this is a big piece of that. We're going to see her return in the Marvels, and that's been confirmed even before the finale. Sort of these puzzle pieces that have been put together, and obviously Thor is out right now. We don't want to spoil any of that for anyone who hasn't seen it, but how are you feeling with this in particular in Phase 4 and Phase 4 as a whole?
Yeah, that's actually, we've been talking about that a little bit, touching on it with the last few podcasts we've been through. Right. I talked about it with Robbie on our Patreon exclusive portion of our podcast, which you can go to search the Infinity Bros on Patreon, and you can get exclusive, uncut access to these episodes where we talk about stuff that we don't talk about during the episode. Most of the time it's totally like off the cuff, and yeah, just complete Mark just going off the wall, and Max not having to edit out everything that Mark says, basically. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. Mark is the wild card in the Infinity Bros. So, but anyways, I personally think I have probably a little bit more optimistic view of Phase 4, because the discourse online has been basically that Phase 4 has no direction. It sucks. Individual movies and the shows are just not up to par on what we expect from Marvel and the MCU. I guess I kind of agree with that to an extent. It surely hasn't been like... I feel like we kind of peaked when it came to Infinity War and Endgame, and I think peaked as a superhero genre culture, honestly. There's so many things that go into Infinity War and Endgame. Just, basically 10 years of movies, like 20 different MCU properties, all funneling into that. And I went back and watched Infinity War a couple weeks ago now. Man, that movie is so good. And I have a hard time thinking that they should be able to keep topping it with every single movie or show that comes out. Like, you can't... I don't know if they're ever going to top that. Infinity War and Endgame was a special, like, moment in entertainment. It's when superhero culture was at its hype, like its highest hype point ever, and we're just kind of on the downside of the general, like, everybody's starting to turn on superhero culture and movies and stuff like that, I think. Sure, Phase 4 is not the same as Phase 3, Phase 2, Phase 1. I think we've gotten some solid installments in Phase 4, and what they're basically doing is rebooting the MCU. We're just taking different characters. We're getting origin stories again for these different characters. And you know what? Like, Phase 1, I was talking to Scott Higa, one of our good friends. Phase 1 doesn't really seem like it has a whole lot of direction either. I mean, obviously you can kind of tell that they're going towards Avengers with all of the post-credit scenes and stuff like that. So I think that's what Phase 4 comes down to, is that we're introducing all of these new characters, And it's all going to come together somehow. Like, trust in Daddy Feige is what Mark would say. Trust in Daddy Feige. We're going to bring it all together. I think the further we get down the road, the more these shows, these characters are all going to connect. There's a couple shows, couple movies in this phase that were kind of hit or miss. Some people really liked them. And one thing that I appreciate about Marvel is that they're trying new stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of people have been complaining that they use the same old formula with every single character, every single movie or show, and they're trying new things. You know, with Moon Knight, we got a very different perspective of a non-typical superhero and a very different perspective and way of telling that story. And I think that even includes Miss Marvel. We just got a fresh perspective on a new hero and a different way of telling that story. So it's going to be hit and miss with some people. Some people are not going to appreciate certain properties, and, you know, that's okay. I appreciate what they're doing, and the same thing goes for me. I mean, not every show is going to be a perfect 6 out of 6 for me, but I still can appreciate each show and movie for what it is. So yeah. I think they're heading the right direction. I think they're going to, and this is a building phase is what it comes down to. They're introducing a lot of characters, and we're going to basically at the end of this phase probably start narrowing it down to the actual direction of where it's heading.
Yeah, I think you've nailed on something here, which is like, people keep saying, you know, they sort of jumped the shark with Infinity War and Endgame, and there's not really anything after that. And this is sort of like maybe the swan song of the MCU. And I see it more like a deep sigh of relief after something incredible, right? Or like,
right.
You've built this tower, like a Jenga tower, and it's always cool to see that tower get knocked over, explode in a million pieces. But right after that, you got to start building that tower again.
Yeah, exactly.
And I feel that's where we are right now. And I think you've sort of nailed that with, this is the foundation that they're putting together. I wanted to touch on this because we're about to talk about the finale. We did get an official rating from Infinity Bro Max, and I want him, hopefully he's on, what's the date today? Hopefully he's on maybe the next episode or the one after that.
Yeah, I think he's coming back this week, so he might be on next weekend.
Max gives it a 2.5 out of 6, which is wild to me.
Oh my. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, I want to be on that pot. I want to be on, here's what it's got to be. It's got to be you and me in one corner. Zane refereeing. Robbie can be cheerleading. He can be the what do they call that?
Facing off against.
Yeah.
The funny thing is though, is even though Mark has been kind of on Max's side as far as disliking Miss Marvel, I think he would probably give this show a 3 or higher out of 6, because that's just like, Mark has seen so many bad movies that he knows this is still good quality. He's like filmmaking. This is still good quality stuff.
Max has only seen like the stuff that he goes to Rotten Tomatoes and it's like, yeah, that's good. I watched that. Mark will watch literally anything, and I think
Mark will watch anything. He's watched more movies than all of us in the Infinity Bros combined. I'm not even joking about that.
You think he just goes to Netflix and just like scrolls until he's bored, and then he's like, "Yep, that
Dude,
one."
Do you remember? Like, this is probably about last year at this time. We didn't have a lot of like new content coming out, Mark. Literally, he's working from home, and he would just have movies on in the background. He would review like 20 movies for our Hot and Snot segments. Like, he would just list them off, and we were all sitting there.
Number 2, and it was something crazy, like 800 movies or something that he watched.
It's wild. Like he watches fantastic. A ridiculous, and now he's got time to watch movies as a new dad with a baby that he's hanging out at home with. So he's got the time. He's got the time. So yeah, but Mark is he knows what a bad movie is, and he knows that even though he didn't like Miss Marvel, I think he'd rate that a lot higher than Max's 2.5 out of 6. That's wild.
I want to go back and see like what else Max has rated around that level, because I can't imagine
it would be interesting to compare.
Like, he's got a real...
Especially Marvel-wise, he's got a pretty high view of most Marvel content. But yeah, I mean, we've mentioned it many times in the last few weeks that Max has been gone. He's like, I think WandaVision literally soured him on the MCU. Like, he has not He has not really
You know what it is?
been
No.
high praise on anything since then.
No, you know what it is? He's at camp right now. Somebody stole his phone. There's a kid with his phone right now.
Oh
I
my
bet
gosh. I
you.
knew
No,
it.
there's no way. Yeah. Okay, so before we get into spoilers for the finale, if you do have hate mail that you need to send to us, you can go ahead and toss that on any of our socials. Just make sure that you point out
Just
this is for
at
Max.
MaxMosier73 on Twitter, or you can email us at infinitybrospodcast@gmail.com. Send us all your hate mail.
Hard for us, yeah.
Just rip them a new one, please.
How do you? Okay,
please.
we need to know. Hold on. I gotta pull this up. Rotten Tomatoes gives Miss Marvel a.
This is
Max,
this
what
is
are you
wild.
doing?
This is wild.
Rotten Tomatoes gives it a 98, certified fresh, and an audience score of 78. And Max is looking at this thing and saying, "That's a 2.4 out of 6."
And Max, for those of you who may be tuning in for the first time, Max basically worships Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, he does.
He thinks Rotten Tomatoes is the bee's knees. He reads all the reviews before going to the movie to see if he wants to go to the movie, basically. He uses Rotten Tomatoes as like a metric to see if he's going to see this movie. And this is rated 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, granted, I have no clue how it's rated 98%, because that is freaking high for an MCU project.
Yeah,
that is
that's
really,
wild.
really high. Like, I don't even think Endgame or Infinity War, they were at like low 90s to 95.
What do you think? Okay,
maybe.
I'll get to this later, but I'm curious to see, because we'll talk about our top 6, or how we rank the 6 Disney Plus, but I can't imagine there's another Disney Plus show that's this high.
No, I doubt it. I very highly doubt it.
Zane says 3.75 for Scott Higa.
For
that
Scott.
0.75.
It's for you, Scott.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let's talk about the finale. We are going to spoil things. We'll put that bumper here in a second. But before we get to the bumper, I have to shout out Mandy at Castaway, who apparently is a big fan of the show. Mandy, I'm sorry that you work or are affiliated with Max.
Yeah, we really apologize for that. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Like, if you need a support group, reach out to us. We're here for you.
Join our Discord. We can chat with you where Max won't
Please.
see it. He won't
Max,
be in Discord chatting.
He'll never check it.
It's a safe space.
I'm so sorry that you work with him, Mandy. We did want to give you that shout out, though, before we go to the spoilers, just in case you've been very busy and haven't been able to see Miss Marvel. So, this is your official spoiler warning. We will put that bumper right here. If you listen beyond this point, it is 100% on you. You cannot blame us for this.
This is
Prepare yourself.
an Infinity Bros
Prepare yourself.
spoiler warning.
Miss Marvel season finale. This picked off on, I don't want to say a cliffhanger, because, we weren't really worried about their safety. Bruno and Kamran had officially gotten out of the shop after finding out that Kamran now has powers. We pick off there. I'm going to do this sort of the same way that we do our movie reviews. I'm going to talk about the characters and how everything is resolved in the finale, more so than a beat-by-beat basis. So the journey thus far has taken us a lot of places. We kind of predicted, you and I, as well as the rest of the guys, predicted that this would be more of a sort of like a sitcom, like teenage, and we sort of got that feel at the beginning, right? Like, you talked about the tonal shift that happened halfway through.
Right.
That's really it, right? Like, we thought this was going to be almost like a Disney TV series sort of thing, and then they go this whole other way with this supernatural thing with the djinn, and it almost feels more like a sort of Guardians or Thor-esque thing. Maybe a little bit of Doctor Strange, like alternate dimension stuff, and really threw us for a loop. I think we all saw this doing one thing, and it did that thing very well, and then they immediately pivot into this sort of supernatural adventure and her seeking out her heritage and all this other stuff. How did you feel about that tonal shift? Did it ruin it for you, or were you here for the ride? Talk about that a little bit.
I will say, so I appreciated what they were trying to do and trying to tell in episodes basically 3 through 5, where they were kind of going back to Kamala's roots and like her heritage And as we find out in the finale that she, is a mutant. We'll talk about that later because that's a huge kind of thing at the end
surprise.
Here. But obviously all this is kind of leading up to that moment, really, because we know that she's got something going on. Her grandmother, I think it was Aisha, she was some kind of mutant as well. They call them like Jinn or the clandestines. And I appreciate what they were trying to do with that. But those first 2 episodes did such a great job of nailing kind of like that teenage, like, oh man, I'm like learning, who I am, kind of starting that coming of age storyline almost. And it just hard pivoted. Like all of us, I don't remember which episode it was. It was like 3, maybe 4, where she was like, oh, we're actually going to Palestine. And it was like, oh, or not Palestine, sorry, Pakistan. We're going to Pakistan and we're going to meet grandma. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, all right, let's go then. And from that point on, like, it was still pretty good. And the episode 5 especially had some really, really great emotional beats that I really wasn't expecting. Where she ends up traveling back in time basically and being the reason that her grandmother or her mom finds her grandfather, right? That's how that goes.
Her grandma, yeah.
Yeah, so like it was a really cool twist. Definitely wasn't expecting that. But then episode 5 ended so abruptly and weird. It was like, oh, then Kamran's got powers, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, careful, what? Blow up! End of the episode. And it was like, what? What is happening right now? Like, just super odd choices, I thought, anyways. Generally, I thought it was pretty good, but I just thought the shift from kind of like the coming of age, like, oh, cool, I got powers, it's going to be awesome. And then all of a sudden it was in this heavy, really emotional story. It was just like, oh, okay. I'm not really sure what to do with this. I don't know how to feel about it. And so I kind of liked it overall, but to me it didn't tell a super cohesive narrative. I, again, enjoyed both parts of the story. It just was weird that they seemed like they were going to lean into the one and then just went full on with the other. And then the finale, I thought was pretty solid. They did a pretty good job of wrapping everything up. So again, do with that what you will. The tonal shift just didn't work for me, but that didn't really detract from the acting. Like you said, superb, almost on all accounts. The only ones that I really was not into was the clandestines. Like, they didn't really convince me. They kind of reminded me of the Flag Smashers in Falcon and Winter Soldier. Like, they just weren't really convincing villains, honestly. And I didn't really get into their story at all. Her family story, on the other hand, that was great. Really enjoyed pretty much every part of that, especially when she comes back in episode 6 and her family kind of just like, when she finally is like honest with her family about what everything's going on, they embrace her and they're like, oh yeah, like this is cool. Let's run with this more, instead of probably what she expected was that she was going to get shunned or, her mom was going to freak out about everything that was going on. So really like that. And, I don't know much about the comic character of Miss Marvel, so I can't really compare like her comic origins from her show origins, MCU origins, but I thought it was great how they kind of wrapped everything up. And like her mom like was like, all right, like this is like, she gave her suit, like made her suit for her, and then her dad basically picked out her name for her in a way that I think Zane mentioned in our group chat was really nice and sweet, and not at all like the super weird way that Fanfortastic did their naming at the end of the series type of thing. Definitely no, like I'm being serious.
No, I'm with you.
I actually loved the way they did that. Like, it was a really nice, endearing conversation between her and her dad at the end, and it introduced it very naturally. And then Fanfortastic, for those of you who haven't seen that movie, don't go see it. Go look up a clip on the end of the movie. It's probably one of the worst superhero movies ever made. Go look up the clip at the end of the movie on how they got their name. It's the dumbest naming of any superhero or superhero team of all time. It's so stupid. So anyways, I thought like everything family-wise worked really well in this series. Just kind of again, tonal shift was the thing that kind of took me out of it a little bit.
Yeah, I think if you were expecting this to happen, or I should say, if you were expecting it to remain the same throughout, it is really jarring. I kind of just wrote it. You know what I mean? I didn't try to fight it. I wasn't like, oh gosh, this isn't what I expected. And I think you and me are a little more easygoing that way when we're like, okay, it's just different.
Yeah, this is just how it is. Let's just go with it.
The way this felt to me, especially with the tonal shift halfway through, was it almost felt like they prepared for more, as if like there were more episodes, or maybe this was supposed to be a movie or something, and they just cut out a lot of pieces, right? Because
that's what I'm saying, man. Like every single one of these series that only gets 6 episodes, they could use at least 2 more episodes. Like 8 episodes would help them draw out some of those moments and make them just more emotional and impactful, and it would make for a more cohesive story. There's this section where towards the middle to the end of this finale, they make it a big point to say like, listen, Kamran doesn't know what happened to his mom. Let's not bring it up. He's not ready for it, blah, blah, blah. And then like maybe 2 to 3 minutes later, it's brought up, and it feels like that was planned to be stretched out a little bit longer. Right. And they're like, shoot, I guess we just tell him. Well, in the same vein too, like Kamran, episode 5, everybody trusts him. He's a perfect, great guy. Like everybody is totally on his side. And then episode 6, he's like, "Oh, I'm the bad guy now."
I'm kind of
just like, "Oh, okay, here we are." Like you could kind of see like when she gave him the powers, like you could kind of see how he might not. Yeah, he might not be a bad guy. He might be like using them for good. But then also, like, everybody loves this guy. Even Bruno, at the end of episode 5, is all in on this guy.
He's
even
like,
though he doesn't like them because he's stealing Kamala away. Like, and then all of a sudden, in episode 6, he's just like, "Oh, nope, just kidding, guys. I'm the bad guy now." It's just like, okay.
You talked about it with the clandestine, how they're like, they start out and she's like, "Oh, I love these guys. They know my mom, or my great-grandma, blah, blah, blah."
Right.
And they're like, surprise, now we're the villain. Like, it's just,
yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
Exactly. Like, and you just add more storytelling to make those emotional moments work, and then it's fine. But there's not as much payoff if you're just like, well, we're good guys and we're trying to help you. Guess what? 3 minutes later in the same episode, we're not good guys and we're trying to kill you. You know, like it doesn't like hit as hard if you're just going flip-flop on everything willy-nilly. So definitely could have used stretching out with all of these Disney Plus shows. Like Moon Knight, I loved Moon Knight, but man, if we had gotten 2 more episodes of that, they could have told a really cool story and probably even gotten Jake Lockley in on the action instead of just teasing him for future MCU stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to touch on this. I think like, you know, I don't think we need to go into any detail on Bruno or Nakia. I think a lot of these characters, like, I'm excited to see what they do with them in the future. Obviously, those 2 in specific are more supporting characters. But you have Red Dagger. Obviously, he's a big hero in the comic book. I don't want to say big hero. He's like a C or D list hero. But he is a cool hero in the comic books, and they sort of touch on his origins as being like, you know, this mystical soldier that's hunting down the clandestine. And now he's working with Kamran. Who Kamran is loosely based off of an Inhumans character. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with that as well. Yeah. And we'll talk about the Inhumans and mutants here in a second. I did want to shout out one of my favorite actresses, and the reason I know this actress is because she's in everything, and also she's a phenomenal voice actress and does a lot for video game characters. So if you guys remember Auntie Ruby, she was one of the, what did they call them, the Illuminantes or whatever? Which, by the way, brilliant naming convention on that. Auntie Ruby was sort of like the main one. Anjali Bhimani, which I know I probably butchered that name. She plays in Overwatch. She's in Apex Legends. She's in the Critical Role TV show. She does like, dude, she's in everything. And so it was cool to see her in this as well. And I think like, if you change any of the actors or actresses in this, it doesn't land the same way. Like everybody played their role so well. The dad, The dad was so
yeah.
freaking endearing to
The
me.
mom and the dad were great. Like
They were so good.
they're
man.
some of the best like family members I feel like we've had introduced
Yeah.
in the MCU in a long time. Like I really, really, really enjoyed their storyline, honestly.
The whole thing, like, absolutely well casted. I do want to say, sorry, go ahead.
Before you like move on from casting, like
Sure.
I want to say Iman Vellani is a perfect casting, and she's gonna be like carrying a lot of weight in the MCU
Absolutely.
in the future. Like I think she's gonna be a main player down the road. She is a perfect casting, and I said this in the group chat. If you take Iman Vellani out of this show, it's probably not that great of a show, honestly. Like with all of the stuff that went through, like she just did phenomenally.
Yeah.
And I will hold to that. She's a perfect casting, and I can't wait to see what she's going to do next.
Going forward, I think, like, you know, we talk about how they're sort of building up this new version of the Avengers with maybe Captain Marvel as the lead. Seems like it would have been Black Panther as well, but obviously that's maybe not the case. I still am firmly planted in whatever phase 5 or 6 or whatever, somewhere down the line, it's going to be all Young Avengers and Champions, whatever they call them. You know, we have Cassie Lang, we have the twins, we have so many people involved in this. And I hope they do Champions. I hope we get Sam Alexander's Nova and some of the other storylines there.
Yeah, that would be epic.
I want to see Miss Marvel leading a team. I would freaking love that, dude. I think she would do so well.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Let's talk, before we get into the sort of big spoiler of, you know, oh, she's a mutant and she has this in her DNA. I want to talk about the actual resolution of the ending before we get to the finale stuff and everything after the credits. How did you feel that this played out? Do you feel satisfied with the ending? Do you feel like these, you know, obviously Disney Plus has this thing where they like do so much and they have to cram a lot of exposition into the end. Do you feel like this suffered from that in the same way that some of the other series has?
Yeah, and I think we've already really went over it, is that like Kamran was actually a likable character as a non-villain. Like I kind of started to like him pretty well by the end. And then they just immediately flipped, and you know, he had I'm sure, you know, like you could kind of tell that he had maybe been thinking about it, like, you know, prior to that, but it didn't really show in any of his character, because they built this whole plan of, you know, being, you know, in this situation in the high school, like, and the whatever agency, the damage control agency is like coming in after them, which is kind of bizarre in the first place. Like that was a weird part of this whole story. Like why were they so intent on getting these two kids with powers that they were willing to destroy a high school
and like
over
murdering them
and murder people? Like what was that all about? Like we like have seen basically nothing of damage control, just like little tiny snippets throughout the MCU, and then all of a sudden they're like this power hungry organization that wants to capture kids with powers. That was
it's
weird.
It's like they were trying to do Shield. Like at some point somebody planned that this was supposed to be Shield. And then nobody told them that like everything was gonna happen with Winter Soldier. So like, oh crap! Right. I guess damage control now wants to murder these kids.
yeah,
I don't know, man. That was wild.
That was weird. But like, I was a little disappointed in Kamran's character because they didn't. I don't know. The payoff, him turning into a villain, didn't sit right with me. I just don't think they earned it with that one, and that could have been remedied if they had another episode or two to build that character. But it just, I don't know, it turned him into another like kind of lame villain, honestly. And you know, he's probably still, do you think he has a future at any point? Like he escaped or whatever, again, but like out of all the villains to not kill, why Kamran? Like he's not really a good villain. Like he's still kind of
makes a better hero,
right. I don't know. It just, the rest of the like everything wrapping up, it was fine. They did the trick. They kind of did what they've doing in all of these episodes. They landed the plane. It didn't look pretty, but they did it. They get where they were trying to go.
There's this line that he says, and I think it sums it up perfectly. He talks about how like he's gonna open the rift, and he says like, you know, that's my home. And I'm like, one,
You've never been there,
soft
bro.
pause, yeah. Soft pause. You've spent 17 years on Earth living among humans.
Yeah.
You realize immediately that, like, your mom and all her friends are terrorists, right? And, like, on top of that, there's nothing for you to go back to. Like, you just found out your mom and everybody you know is dead.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to bring up next. He finds out his mom's dead, and then he still continues
like,
this path of whatever he's doing.
Home.
It's like,
what?
What are you doing?
No, it's not. Shut up.
Yeah.
That was
Didn't
rough.
feel earned for sure. Again, that could have been remedied if they had another episode or two to focus on his character and like probably the inner turmoil that was happening, but we didn't see it on screen.
Yeah. I want to touch on one more thing before we get to, like, because I think we're going to talk about mutants and Inhumans for quite a while. I want to talk about what the heck happened with Captain Marvel at the end of this. That was so
that was
like
weird.
like unnecessary, and why?
This is a very interesting thing. So, okay.
Yeah, please.
Obviously, Miss Marvel or Captain Marvel shows up at the end credit scene. She Miss Marvel is standing there, gets apparated out. Like it makes the weird apparated movements and everything if you guys are Harry Potter fans. And Captain Marvel shows up. There is kind of slight discourse is this Miss Marvel in Captain Marvel's body? Or is this Captain Marvel? She wakes up, she looks at this stiff, she looks around the room.
Yeah.
Obviously it seems like she doesn't recognize any of this, and it's weird that she's all over the wall. So it's pretty clear that that's Captain Marvel and not Miss Marvel in her body or anything like that. Yeah. But and you and Max, strangely enough, Max is on
Max is kind of the apologist.
He's on the Captain Marvel, he likes Captain Marvel side. I feel like most people aren't on that side. You are. Yeah. I'm kind of in the middle. It was fine. It wasn't really great. It wasn't terrible. It seems I was more excited to see her in this post-credit scene than I was for Captain Marvel. Is that weird? I was kind of excited to see her here, actually. And again, have no clue what it means. It was super weird. I have no idea where they're going with this, but I was kind of okay, now they're connected. That's an actual lead-in to another thing in the future, which a lot of these shows haven't really given us. So that was one thing that I was kind of excited about.
It was cool to see, and it was oh, sweet. But immediately I'm this feels a little forced, don't we think? She's in her bedroom.
Right. Yeah, that definitely, it happened abruptly. And that's another thing that I've been saying about this whole phase, honestly, because I said it with Multiverse of Madness. I said it with Thor. Yeah. Everything just seems so rushed. They're trying to, it almost it's kind of the same thing with Thor, the first Thor, and the first Avenger, Captain America, the first Avenger. They were pushing those movies out pretty quickly to try to get ready for Avengers. And it kind of felt like that a little bit. They're trying to push these movies out and move on to the next thing. Right. And they're trying to tell their story quick, still get people excited, obviously. Multiverse of Madness was pretty big and people were pretty excited about that. But it just seems like they could be adding a little bit of storytelling and exposition, 15 minutes to each of these movies that would help those big moments along. But they've just been chopping it up a little bit, making it oh, all right, now Wanda is the villain. Go. Oh, okay, all right, here we go. So in that sense, that it kind of fits with Phase 4 and where we've been going.
This is going to be the most niche. There's probably less than 1% of our audience that is going to understand what the heck I'm talking about. But when I was a kid, I used to go to this theme park called Lagoon, and there's a ride there called the Mouse or Mousetrap or something like that. And I think it was based off of the board game, or maybe that's one of those Mandela effect things. Anyways, I love this ride because thematically it looked sweet. But every time I would get up there, it'd be jerk and go left and right.
Yeah,
and it went so fast that it would hurt my spine. Okay,
Valley Fair has one of those too, and you're totally right. It hurts. It's not a fun ride to be on.
That's what Phase 4 feels like to me sometimes. Like, you like it, the ride's cool, you're excited to be there, and then it's just like, we're going this way.
That's a great analogy. I love
That's
that.
how it felt to me. If you've ever been to Lagoon, I just, like, unlocked a core memory for you, because that ride is so, like, jarring. But yeah, speaking of, like, wild misdirections, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Mutants are now officially in the MCU in the weirdest way possible.
Yeah.
What did you think of this? Like, as first, let's talk about, like, this is how you introduce them? This is how, like, this is our first official, like, there are mutants in the MCU. How'd you feel about that? I mean, technically Xavier, but
right.
Whatever.
I don't even know how I felt, honestly, because I missed the little musical chime that played that was like the X-Men animated series chime. I totally missed that, but I mean, they were obviously talking about mutants, like the conversation was there. So I was like,
you have a mutation. Like, okay, come on, you can say it.
I was like, okay, I mean, based on all of that and him not saying it, you could probably still twist this into her being an Inhuman, but like, it's so on the nose that it's like, I think they're talking about her being a mutant. So that was what was going through my head, and I had no idea what to do with that information. I was not expecting that at all. I was like, okay, I'm excited.
I had to pause and rewind it because I'm like, wait.
Yeah. And then I saw the musical ditty later, and obviously with the musical thing, it's like, oh, well, yeah, she's a mutant. Yeah, duh. But just wild. Like you said, like, this was totally not expected. Blindsided everybody. It's pretty wild that they were able to keep that under wraps with all the leaks that are going on.
Oh my gosh, for real.
Just what a wild way to find out. Okay, and you probably are going to ask these questions already. Jarret, like, what does this mean? Are Inhumans extinct? Are we never going to see them in the MCU? What is Black Bolt in Multiverse of Madness if the MCU does not have Inhumans? What is that?
I don't know how to, like, reconcile this, because I also don't think we're getting, like, our Charles Xavier, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think it's one of those things where they're just going to say, like, it's multiverse stuff. Like, yeah, there's Inhumans there, but they're not here. As much as I hate this, I want the Inhumans. I think there's amazing stories to be told there. I don't think we're getting them. Like, truthfully, I think they're going to hand wave everything to be a mutant. Yeah. If you're not a superhero by any other means, you're a mutant.
Yeah.
And so it cuts off a lot of the stuff that I enjoy, but
I think Zane and I were talking about this. Really, it's not that much of a stretch to just call Inhumans mutants. Like, I mean, they're basically a mutant that is of a different race, but like, so are mutants, right? Like, yeah. So what's really the big difference between them? Obviously, there is like some decent Inhuman lore in the in the Marvel like comics that we don't want to carry over like the Inhumans show, because we've obviously talked about that and how horrendous that was. Man, it would be sad if we didn't get any of the actual Inhumans involved in the MCU at some point. So I get your sentiment on that, but what if we just get those Inhumans and they just call them mutants? What if they just are, somehow incorporated into the mutant storyline, and they're all, kind of one big X-Men happy family?
I think, like, a couple things that we missed out on. One is, like, Inhumans have their own society that I think is quite interesting, with Adelon and the blue part of the moon and all this, and I think that lends some good stuff. Obviously, like, that is such deep lore in a very specific thing that I don't know if the MCU would ever touch something like that. So that getting swept under the rug, sure, that's kind of okay. The thing that is always interesting to me is there is sort of like, there's always a storyline that goes through the X-Men about like persecution and things that they have to say about that. And one of the most interesting points that this comes to head is when the Terrigenesis Mist, which if you're not a Marvel fan is like how Inhumans are created. Basically, this whole thing is released on Earth. And if you're an Inhuman, that's cool because it means you might get human powers, whether you know it or not, right? For mutants, this is deadly. This is like straight up insta-kill.
Right.
And so you have this interesting like dichotomy where these two like civilizations, one that's used to being like the doormat of all humanity versus this like elitist, we're separate from you, we have this own like hierarchy in society,
right?
And they kind of come to clash with one another, and I always found that interesting. But if we don't get that, it's not the end of the world.
Right. That definitely is an interesting story to tell. It'll be interesting to see if and when they try to even touch that with just their
That's like
history.
Space 27, yeah.
Right,
like,
with the history of the Inhuman show. But, like,
sure.
I mean, then, like, we all thought that was, like, never, ever going to happen. But then Black Bolt shows up in Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah.
And it's Anson Mount who played Black Bolt in the horrible TV series.
Awful series.
At this point, anything is really on the table, honestly.
Yeah.
So, is it possible? Sure. With the direction that they're heading, I think it's more likely that they kind of stick with the mutant storyline. It would be interesting to see some type of Inhuman inclusion, though, in the MCU. So we'll definitely have to see where that heads. But I think that was a really interesting twist, and I'm not mad about it. Like, I think Kamala is gonna be a great mutant, potentially X-Man. Like,
it's so weird to think
it's
of
so
her as
interesting.
a
Yeah,
mutant,
I know, right? Like, it's gonna be really interesting. And now, like you said, we have official confirmation of mutants in the MCU.
In our MCU, right? Like
our MCU,
not multiverse.
Exactly.
Our home
right.
MCU.
And it'll be interesting to see how they handle that, because we still have to kind of explain away, where have all these mutants been our whole MCU existence? Like, what's going on with that? Is there some big universal thing that happens that all the X gene gets activated, or how do we explain away how these mutants haven't been involved in all of these movies up until this
there have
point?
been some pretty heavy leaks, and we won't talk about them because I think that's for people. Like, if you want to go find it, you can go find it on your own. But if any of the leaks are to be believed, I think Black Panther, the new Black Panther movie, will have a lot to talk about that. We'll see.
Yeah.
I want to. We're going kind of long, which I'm glad, because it means we've had good conversation. I want to get one more thing before we kick off to our top 6. If you had to pick 3 mutants and 3 Inhumans to bring into the MCU right now, who would your best 3 be?
Oh man, that's tough, because
let's go mutants first, because I feel like you know more mutants. Probably.
Yeah, mutants is not as bad, because I'm obviously familiar with X-Men. I haven't read a whole lot of X-Men comics, but X-Men are everywhere, and back in the 90s, the X-Men were it. Like, they were the Marvel team. So I mean, number 1 is Wolverine. I know a lot of people say that that's overdone already, but how do you have X-Men without Wolverine at this point?
Or the Avenger. Dude's an Avenger.
Yeah,
through and through.
Exactly. I think he's got to be included somehow. That's number 1. Number 2, I think they've had a interesting inclusion of him, but a good Cyclops would be interesting in the MCU.
You don't like James Marsden as Cyclops?
No, James Marsden did a pretty good job as no.
What?
I actually enjoy him. I don't enjoy the character of Cyclops.
Sure.
This is very interesting,
I'm
because
so ready for Scott to hate mail us. Let's go.
Oh yeah, he's gonna totally be writing us letters about this
I hate
episode.
Cyclops too. So
Cyclops
Cyclops
is a jerk. He's not a good guy in the comics. They kind of made him out to be a nice guy in the movies with James Marsden. So I don't mind James Marsden's portrayal of him, but I want the jerk Cyclops in the MCU, because that's gonna rile up. That would be the mutants equivalent in the MCU of Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. He riles everybody up. Drama is all around him. I think that would be a good addition to the MCU, even if I don't like him as a character. So that's number 2. Again, I'm not super duper familiar with the deep reaches of
I was gonna say, he's gonna be
that. So my main
what?
I think, I don't know. I think Storm would probably be another one, because
I like that.
Storm is a great, great, great character, and it wasn't Halle Berry's fault, but she did dirty in the X-Men series or the original movies.
If we get Storm and Wakanda or in a Black Panther.
Oh man, see, yeah, there's a lot of things they could do with that. That would be really cool. So, and Storm is again great, great comic character. She'd be a great leader of the X-Men team that they try to introduce to the X-Men, and obviously you would have Cyclops there, so there would be some interesting things to go back and forth on. But Storm is a great character. It would be sweet to see her power set and her character utilized to its full potential, because she's like one of the most powerful mutants, and she just got super underutilized in the X-Men movie series from Fox. So I think those are my three that I would love to see. All right, let's do you now. What would you like to see with your three?
Three mutants. Okay. This is good. I have a hard time because this would be just my guilty pleasure list. It would be I want Cable and Hope and
yeah.
Glob Herman for Moose.
Glob. Yeah, Moose is all about Glob.
Gosh, ones that I think could fit into the MCU right now. Obviously, I think Wolverine could pop in as an X-Men. I think that would be great. Gosh, I should have thought about this because I do just want to say
you just threw it at
Cable
me
and Hope. Yeah,
just do it.
It's got to be Cable for sure. I think because they're doing the Kang stuff and obviously him time traveling, I want to see gritty. Gosh, if you could steal Cable. Because Josh Brolin did such a great job.
Oh my gosh, he did. He did a great job, yeah.
But people would be so confused.
Yeah, they would.
And I gotta agree with you for Storm. For all the reasons that you listed and more, I think they're doing a lot with her in the X-Men right now. In the Jonathan Hickman stuff, that I'm man, she would do so well on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Any Inhumans you want to bring into the new world?
So here is I'm not very up on Inhuman lore. But because we saw him in Multiverse of Madness, Black Bolt, they actually Anson Mount, and that little portrayal that he did was fantastic in Multiverse of Madness.
I was gonna say he killed it, but that feels wrong to say.
I would not be sad to see.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I would not be sad to see him back as Black Bolt.
Yeah.
To Lockjaw, because he's a giant dog that teleports people. What you have? That's fantastic.
Miss Marvel's dog.
Yes, that would be incredible to see him in there. And then 3, we've got Crystal, which would be weird because Quicksilver's dead technically. I don't know how you would work that in there. Crystal is Quicksilver's girlfriend thing. It would be interesting, but she's an interesting character too. And Medusa,
I like that.
Medusa got done dirty in. I only watched the very first episode of Inhumans, and that was enough.
You didn't have to watch past that.
She, the clips that I've seen of her in that show are just woof. I am sorry for that portrayal of Medusa. So, and she's a cool leader of the Inhumans too. So, I mean, obviously, Black Bolt and Medusa, you can't really not have an Inhuman storyline without including them. But Lockjaw would be the coolest one, in my opinion. But Crystal is kind of interesting. It probably wouldn't work out in the MCU just based on her history with Quicksilver.
Yeah, I like that. I think I would go Dante, who's a newer character from Inhumans. Karnak, because I always thought his character was super interesting. What does a superhero who can perceive the flaw in everything look like?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I totally forgot.
Oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. And then Lockjaw, because we have Miss Marvel, and that's her dog,
yes.
Man. So
awesome.
Good. Okay, we have talked ad nauseum about Miss Marvel, and so to bring it home, this question was posed to me by a very angry Mark, who said, "Is Miss Marvel the best TV series from Disney Plus right now? Do you love this so much?" And I said, "I don't know. It ranks up there. I don't know.
A super decisive answer.
Yeah,
love it.
No, actually, I did tell him no, but I didn't want to spoil my ranking just yet. So Mark threw this question at me, and I think we should talk about this a little bit.
We're going in 3, 2. You're entering the top 5 on the Infinity Bros podcast. Starting now.
What is your top 6 Disney Plus Marvel series? And we'll kind of ping pong back and forth. So what is your number 6, the worst of the 6 right now?
My number 6 is actually Miss Marvel.
Wow.
It's not bad by any means. So that tells you how much I've been enjoying these Disney Plus shows. I give it a 4 out of 6. That's the worst Disney Plus show that I've ranked out of all of these. Again, didn't not enjoy it, but out of all of these rankings, I probably have to put that one last.
Wow. Okay, so my number 6, and I'm gonna get hate mail for this one. What If? I thought it was cool for some of the things that it was set up, but overall it didn't. I don't think it sunk its teeth into me in the way that some of these other ones did. And obviously, like, I am super, super biased with 2 of these on the list, so something had to be last.
Yep.
What If is phenomenal. I think it's a great series, but it is the lowest on the list for me.
Yeah.
Right. What's your number 5?
I think it goes to show for both of us that we didn't hate any of these series. Like, Max obviously has rated, probably WandaVision has at 2 out of 6, and I'm assuming Miss Marvel is ranked slightly above that at 2.5. That's what I'm assuming his ranking is. Jarrett and I enjoy these shows, and we like what they're doing with them. Are they 6 out of 6s for every single show? No, but we're still enjoying them for what they are. So just thought we had to get that out there.
Here's the problem with an Isaac and Jarret mess around, and I'm going to say this real quick for anybody who's under any disillusion about this. Isaac, if you were to rank the Infinity Bros, or like give it, Isaac is a golden retriever, people. Like, he's not going to look at a series and be like, that's the worst garbage ever made, and you should feel bad. That's true.
I watched Halo, and I gave it a 3.5 out of 6. No. There's I enjoyed it still.
I'm a Labrador. I feel like I'm still gonna pee on your carpet, but like I'm lovable. So yeah, you're not gonna get like a lot of hate from us. But all right, number 5 for you, my man.
All right, my number 5 is WandaVision. I actually really, really enjoyed most of this show. Honestly, the just how they wrapped everything up just didn't pan out. And I know I personally am guilty of overhyping this show. I will fully admit that. I mean, we were going nuts on our podcast, doing all the theories about what could happen. They were dropping hints of things that were going to happen that never happened. And that's okay. You got me, Marvel. Like I'm assuming that's what your goal was, kind of leading us on these different rabbit trails to finally pull out the trump card that wasn't really a trump card. So it just didn't hit for me. I did absolutely love Catherine Hahn as what's her name now? Agatha Harkness. I love that, but she just didn't strike me as a really strong main, antagonist or main villain. So when it came out to be her and they had the final battle, it was like, okay, it was cool, but it really wasn't like a massive hit for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you. I think WandaVision is my number 5 as well. It was such like a cultural event that at the time we were all sort of riding the high. Yeah. And I think now that we've had time to sit on it a little bit, and I went back and rewatched it a couple of times, it just doesn't do it for me anymore. I think because we were so excited about like who's the villain, or like we knew Agatha was there, but like is Mephisto part of this, and what's the deal with the commercials? Mm-hmm. And that ending was such a massive letdown, and obviously like, God forbid Max was on this podcast, he'd pull out his soapbox, but
we'd be talking for another 15 minutes about WandaVision right now.
It didn't land the plane. It crashed it right into the ground, along with our hopes and dreams. So yeah, that one, as much as I love it, it's number 5 for me. Yeah. Number 4.
My number 4 is What If, for the same reasons that you mentioned. I thought it was really cool how they were introducing all these different like multiversal elements and stuff like that, but we didn't know that it was going to get all wrapped together until like episode 7, I think, is when they started dropping hints. Right. And then it was like, wait, like, why haven't we been seeing hints like 5 episodes ago? Like, it just, it was like they made half of these episodes and then they were like, oh, you know what?
Ah,
We should
shoot,
like
we gotta
actually
finish
tie
the
all
story.
these together. You know, like that's what it felt like. And they actually like did a fine job with the last 3 episodes were cool.
Sure.
I liked them, but it just seemed like they started the show out thinking it was just going to be one-off episodes and then decided to make it into a season thing, you know? And so that it just felt kind of weird. And there were episodes that just didn't hit for me. There were episodes that were like, okay, that was fine. It wasn't like the best thing ever. And then there was episodes that were great. So, you know, it was cool for what it was, and it was a cool animated, you know, thing that we haven't seen yet. So I like that they're trying new things, and I could appreciate it for what it was.
My number 4, you're gonna want to sit down for. Isaac, are you sitting?
I'm sitting. I think I'm sitting. Am I? Yeah, I'm sitting. Okay. All right. Let's hear it.
Sorry, that was a callback to Miss Marvel. By the way, I freaking love that counselor. That was so funny.
That was hilarious.
Okay, this one's gonna surprise all of you. My number 4 is Hawkeye.
Wow. Really?
I freaking love this series, and the more I think about this series, the angrier I get, because the ending was such a disappointment to me. That I'm like, and so by all means, this should be my number 1, right? I love Hawkeye, but I'm so mad at what they did with the ending and how like just jarring and weird it felt, that it sort of takes that flavor away from me, that I'm like, you guys had so much working for you.
Yeah.
And you didn't get there in the end. And I will never forgive them for not giving us an entirely deaf episode. Like, all the pieces
so cool,
were
dude.
set up, and it just
That would've been so
never
cool.
got there.
Yeah.
So for
definitely
that, it's
a lot
number
of missed shots on that one. But yeah, I agree with you on most of that, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But my number 3 is actually Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Oh, yeah.
This one was great. Had a lot of great moments. But
Oh, wait,
really,
there's 7 of these. I totally forgot Falcon and the
There's 7?
Winter Soldier. Yes.
what did I forget then?
I don't know.
I guess we'll find out. Okay. Well, okay. Falcon and Winter Soldier is my 3. You know, it was good. It was a really good show, and it kind of just turned into basically a generic action show is what it did. But I absolutely love Sam Wilson as Captain America. Can't wait for Captain America 4. I talked about it earlier. Flag Smashers were kind of a blah villain group. John Walker as U.S. agent, that was interesting. That was probably one of the better beats of that show. Really excited to see where that leads, because that's going down some interesting roads with potential Thunderbolt, you know, movie and stuff down the road. So really interesting stuff with that. But kind of was just a generic MCU action stuff with some cool elements like intertwined in it. So that was my number 3.
Yeah, for those keeping track at home, I would put Falcon and the Winter Soldier just below Hawkeye. I think it was phenomenal. I loved it. Did not love it as much as Hawkeye. Okay, my number 3. Yeah, there are. Okay, my number 3 is Miss Marvel. I freaking love this series, man. I thought it was phenomenal. It's got issues for sure, and it doesn't have the benefit of being like one of my childhood favorites. Miss Marvel's a character I came to later in life and really enjoyed. But man, like, I don't know what to say about this series other than it is so incredibly charming, and all the actors and actresses just like really sold it for me. Yeah, just freaking love this series.
I just realized what I forgot on my list now.
Oh,
I was like, oh my gosh.
Everything above is obviously, like, at this point we're just talking about the greatest hits here. What is your number 2?
Well, actually, so this bumps everything down on my list because
okay.
my one that I missed, I'm
Is the one your
including
number
is
one?
it's
Okay.
still in my top 3, so that it
Sure.
didn't really change
Okay.
anything. So this
Okay.
is my actual number 3 now, but it's Hawkeye.
Okay.
I loved everything about this show, and I will agree with you that the last episode, man, they really fumbled that ending, and I actually enjoyed most of the things they did in the ending. It really made you go like, holy crap, like, wow, they wanted to go all out, but they just didn't set themselves up great for the future of some of these characters, like especially Kingpin and Echo. Those are the ones that, like, those characters really, like, I loved how they did with like Haley Steinfeld's Hawkeye and Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye, those characters loved everything about that show. It would have been amazing if they had a completely, you know, no audio episode, like you say, Jarret. That would have been, icing on the cake. But Kingpin, he started out kind of similar to what he was in the Daredevil series, which that's what everybody wanted. And then he got into this weird comic book mode that just didn't fit his character that he already has been established in Daredevil.
It's kind of goofy, huh?
Yeah, it was goofy. It was goofy. Like, and I didn't hate it necessarily, but it didn't fit. And then Echo, they didn't use her almost at all in the Hawkeye series, and that's a real bummer, especially with her own series coming out. They didn't set her up. Like, I don't think that many people are interested in the Echo series because they didn't set her up very well in the Hawkeye series. So it's a bummer how they kind of fumbled the ball with those characters, but I still really, really enjoyed the show and everything. The storyline, incredible. Love Haley Steinfeld as Hawkeye and can't wait to see her take over. But that would be my number 3.
Go ahead and do your number 2 real quick.
Number 2 is Loki. And I think this is probably, if we're looking at it from a critical standpoint, this is probably the best show in Phase 4.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved everything they did with this character. They kept us guessing, didn't really know what was going to happen until the final episode, really. And we did almost the same thing we did with WandaVision with Loki. We had no clue what was happening. They were kind of dropping little hints here and there. But with this show, it was leading to a clear direction and ending. We just didn't know what that ending was. Like, we had zero clue.
And can we talk about, like, landing the plane? That is the best ending.
That was incredible. Jonathan Majors as Kang is going to be fantastic. And then here's something that they did in some of these earlier shows that I appreciated that they kind of, didn't do in these later shows, is that they immediately, right after the finale ended, said that Loki's coming back for season 2.
Right.
Didn't do that for Moon Knight. Obviously, Oscar Isaac is up in the air. He hasn't signed, contracts for future stuff. We don't know anything about, obviously Ms. Marvel is coming back in the Marvels, but like, it just felt like all of these other shows were kind of like, we don't know what's going on with them after this. And that was nice that we were like, all right, we're getting a season 2 of Loki. This is obviously the future of the MCU, where this is heading right now. So that was awesome. Everything about this show was fantastic. I absolutely loved the direction that they're heading with it. I wish, again, that they could have just drawn that out 2 more episodes to just make those big moments just bigger. Yeah. But other than that, loved everything about it. Owen Wilson as Mobius is fantastic. Can't wait to see him in season 2. All the characters in this, just fantastic. Just a great show overall. And that, again, I think that's the best critical show that we've had in the MCU so far. Not my favorite, though. What's your number 2?
No spoiler, or no surprise here. Loki's my number 2. This is the one that I tell people, like, if you can watch one show on Disney Plus, a lot of these other ones you kind of have to be superhero fans, or right. They are what they are.
Yeah.
Loki is the one I point people towards, and I say, like, you have to watch this. Like, it's a big part of what the MCU is, and it's the best. Like, as far as like how it's produced, how the story plays out. So it comes at no surprise to anybody. My number 1 is Moon Knight, and that is a guilty pleasure. They gave me so much with a lot of things that I was not expecting. It touched me on a personal level, like so emotional. And this is my hero, right? The first comic book I ever bought for myself was a Moon Knight comic book. Like, he's always been my number 1. And so if you were to go back, even 5 years ago and say, like, listen, I'm glad that you're excited for all this Avengers stuff, but someday you're getting Moon Knight, I would have called you a liar. And here we are, like, one of my favorite actors played him. The series, obviously not without its flaws, still gave me everything I asked for and more. And so the fact that, like, we're sitting here in 2022 and I can say, like, Moon Knight has a TV series and is in the MCU is just mind-blowing to me.
Jarret was eating well this year and last year.
Dude, it's
with
it's
Moon Knight
everything
and
I want
Hawkeye.
more.
Just wow. Who would have predicted that this is what the MCU is going to come to 10 years ago, like pre Infinity War and pre Endgame.
Apparently, I just need to ask, right?
Apparently.
Like,
Yes, sir. Yeah, praying for different characters.
I need a wish list. So like, give me both Novas.
This is the official request here.
Yeah,
Kevin Feige is going to listen to
apparently
this.
listen to our podcast because like
Apparently.
Hawkeye and Moon Knight in the same year. Yeah.
Yeah. So my number one is also Moon Knight, and I think it's my favorite for a lot of the same reasons you mentioned. My disclaimer is I didn't know. I knew who Moon
Because
Knight
growing
was.
up, yeah, as a young boy, you went to a yard sale and you found Moon Knight issue 36, and you found no.
Not quite. I did know who Moon Knight was, but that was about it. Like I knew kind of a general who he was. I had read him in like crossover events and stuff like that, but I've never read an actual Moon Knight comic. So I knew who he was and I was excited for it, but I just absolutely love Oscar Isaac and his portrayal of Moon Knight, and the different personalities. And they did take some liberties, which didn't bug me because I'm not like, I didn't know everything about the character in the first place. So it wasn't like egregious to me that they changed, one of his personalities and all this stuff from the comics. But just the way they told that story in the amount of time that they had, I thought that was the best, like, well-told story in the amount that they had that was from a different perspective than the normal superhero story. They dealt with mental illness in a way that we haven't seen before, probably won't even see ever again. Like, we'll obviously have, I would hope anyways, we'll obviously have Oscar Isaac returning as Moon Knight in the future, but like, I don't know how you address mental health as well as they did in that show.
Yeah.
Just incredible. Across the board, the acting in that show is phenomenal. All of the acting is incredible. There were, again, it's not without its flaws. Like, I think we've had issues with CGI throughout a lot of these shows. And they really are shows, and I don't know if Disney Plus is treating them like shows and giving them show budgets, but it just seems like some of that CGI is just a little
rough,
spotty, a little rough in some parts. But that's not, it's not to say that it didn't detract from the storyline for me. But I just absolutely loved everything about that show, and that one is definitely my favorite. I wouldn't say by far, because Loki is definitely up there as well. But I wouldn't give any of these shows a 6 out of 6. I think Moon Knight, my number one, I'd probably give a 5.5 out of 6, or maybe even probably a 5.5, because Loki's probably 5.5 as well for me. So all of those shows, really fun to watch, but that was the one I feel like I got the most enjoyment out of, and that they handled the best way, but still and we kind of mentioned that experimental thing. They're trying different things, and I appreciate that. In this one, they tried something different and it hit, like it stuck for me.
Yeah.
So that's my number one as well.
There you have it. That's the official ranking of the top 7. We totally thought there
was
six.
I can't believe we thought there was 6. And me and you, the funny thing is, me and you forgot different shows.
Yeah, yeah.
Can't believe that. It's wild.
If you want to hear us talking about what the heck that was going on there, there is a section on the Patreon where we actually were like, we were talking about like, hey, we should quickly do a top 6. Thank you guys for joining us. If you have not joined us on our socials, you should go check us out. Facebook, Twitter. If you get the itch to Twitch, we're on there. We've been on a sort of soft hiatus on Twitch.
Yeah. Everybody's been on vacation and at camp and doing all sorts of things. So,
but hopefully we come back with a bang here soon. I think a lot of us are returning from wherever the heck we've been. So check us out there. Hop in our Discord. Talk crap about Max so that he'll never see it, because he rarely frequents the Discord.
Nope, never.
Check us out on Patreon. If you want to throw money our way, you get to hear us talk about dumb stuff a little longer than we normally do. And check out Mini Worlds Tavern. Make sure to use our code so that you get a discount and enjoy some incredible coffee. It is The Infinity Bros, all one word, all uppercase at checkout, or miniworldstavern.com/The Infinity Bros. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been the Infinity Bros Podcast. We love you 3000. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in to the Infinity Bros Podcast. You can find the Infinity Bros on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube at The Infinity Bros. You can also check out our website at theinfinitybros.com for links, reviews, and sweet merch. Feel free to send us listener feedback via social media or email at infinitybrospodcast@gmail.com.